The book of Daniel is my favorite book in the Bible. It is not in chronological order. I don't know why, as of yet, but the true order of Daniel is 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, and 12. We can know this by those who ruled during Daniel's time and the history of the Middle East. The prophecies in Daniel are vital to understand because it contains more about our future than it does for Daniel's. In this series I will go over each chapter and explain the prophecies. I'm not including a lot of scripture with this study, so please feel free to get out your King James Bible and follow along. Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar besieged Judah during the third-year reign of Jehoiakim and took captives and treasures from the temple back to Babylon. He sent his servant Ashpenaz, an eunuch, to bring him the well-favored and skillful men of the captives. Nebuchadnezzar wanted men of royal lineage, very smart men, scientists, and men able to learn his language and laws so they could teach the other captives. They were brought to the Babylonian palace and given a daily ration of the king's food and wine. They were to serve 3 years in hopes that they will reign in Judah and Jerusalem according to Babylonian laws. In 2 Kings we see that Jehoiakim served the 3 years before he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar and was killed. Among the chosen were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs, changed their names to Babylonian names. Daniel is Belteshazzar, Hananiah is Shadrach, Mishael is Meshach, and Azariah is Abednego. Daniel did not want to eat the king's food. The king was eating unclean food, like pork, that would have gone against Daniel's beliefs. Ashpenaz, who was very fond of Daniel, was afraid that if Daniel didn't eat the same as the other captives, he would become frail and not be worthy of going before the king. Therefore, the king would see it as Ashpenaz's fault and punish him. Daniel asked Melzar, who was appointed over him, if he and his 3 friends could eat pulse, which is beans and lentils, and water for 10 days and then see who was better fit between them and the ones that ate the king's food. After the 10 days, they were indeed fitter than the others. God blessed Daniel and his 3 friends with knowledge, skill, and wisdom. Daniel had understanding of dreams and visions. After the 3 years, they were brought before King Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar found Daniel and his friends to be 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers in his realm. Daniel served in the palace through the first year of King Cyrus. Cyrus was the one who allowed the Jews to go back home and rebuild their temple during his first year. In his second year, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that troubled him so much that he couldn't sleep. He called for his magicians, astrologers, and sorcerers to tell him about the dream and what it meant. He didn't want to tell them about the dream for fear they would just say whatever sounded good as an interpretation. So, they had to tell Nebuchadnezzar what happened in his dream and then interpret it. All of them said it was an impossible request. This angered Nebuchadnezzar and he commanded that all the wise men in Babylon be killed. Basically, he thought they were worthless dead weight. Daniel, of course, was among these wise men and when they came to kill him he wanted to know why. Daniel then went to the king to ask for time and then he would do what the others could not. Daniel went back to his 3 friends and told them what was happening. During the night in a dream, God told Daniel about Nebuchadnezzar's dream and what it meant. Daniel then praised God for saving lives. Daniel went to Arioch, who was sent to kill the wise men, and told him not to kill them. He will show the king the meaning of the dream because God reveals secrets. Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar that he will tell him about the dream but he didn't want any rewards. Daniel describes Nebuchadnezzar's dream. It was a great and terrible image. A statue in the image of Nebuchadnezzar. The head was of fine gold. The breast and arms of silver. The belly and thighs of brass. The legs of iron. The feet part iron and part clay. A stone cut without hands smote the image at its feet and broke them into pieces. This stone is Jesus in Acts 4 verse 11. The image fell and shattered and became like dust in the wind and it blew away. The stone then became a mountain and ruled the earth. You can see why this troubled Nebuchadnezzar. He saw himself being destroyed. Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar that the God of heaven gave him the kingdom and the power to rule. Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold, which is the Babylonian Empire. After that shall arise another kingdom inferior to Babylon, which is the Medo-Persian Empire. And then a third kingdom shall rule the earth, which is the Grecian Empire. The fourth kingdom will be as strong as iron. This is the Roman Empire, both Western and Eastern. According to history, this is the order of early major empires. So, in approximately 601 BC, the Bible tells about things to come years into their future. The book of Daniel was completed around 520 BC, still about 457 years before Rome took over Jerusalem. Why shouldn't we believe the prophecies of our future? Daniel continues with the dream: the last kingdom will be divided. Part iron and part clay. Partly strong and partly broken. The toes are 10 leaders of this kingdom. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, a diverse population, but will not mix with each other. In these days God will set up his kingdom and destroy all the kingdoms before it. History will be gone and forgotten. God will give us a clean slate. This is our near future. Nebuchadnezzar saw that Daniel's God was the God of gods and made Daniel a chief of the governors over all the wise men, and he lived with the king. Daniel requested that his 3 friends rule over the province of Babylon. And it was so. Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold. Despite the dream he had, his greed for power took over. The image was 60 cubits, which is 90 feet or 10 stories high, and the breadth was 6 cubits, or 9 feet wide. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. This image was probably like an obelisk pillar. Then Nebuchadnezzar brought together all his leaders and rulers to dedicate the image. When the herald cried aloud and the music played, all the people were to fall down and worship the image. This is a lot like the Muslims' call to prayer, the Adhan. Those who didn't fall down and worship would be thrown into the fiery furnace. God has patterns in his great plan, and so does Satan. This worshipping pattern will be much like the end times, but, when that happens, if the people don't worship, they will be beheaded instead. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to fall and worship the image. Nebuchadnezzar called for them to be brought before him and told them they are commanded to worship as it has been instructed or be thrown into the furnace. They told him that if their God wanted to, he would protect them from the fire. Even if he didn't choose to protect them, they still will not worship the other gods or the image. This angered Nebuchadnezzar so much that he ordered the furnace fire to be 7 times hotter than normal. Then he had them tied up, clothes and all, and thrown into the furnace. The fire was so great that a flame shot out and killed the men that escorted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as they were tossed in. When Nebuchadnezzar looked into the furnace, he saw 4 men, instead of 3, walking around in the flames. The fourth was described like the Son of God. This is Jesus. Then Nebuchadnezzar called to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to come out. They had no injuries, no burns, no scorch marks, not even a smoke smell. After this, Nebuchadnezzar made a decree that no one was to speak a word against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's God, or they would be killed. He then promoted them to a higher position in the province of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar wrote a letter after something extraordinary happened to him. He writes that he was sleeping in his palace when he had a dream that made him very afraid, and it troubled him. He again tried to have his magicians and astrologers interpret the dream, which they couldn't do. Daniel, who was now the master of the magicians, came to him, and Nebuchadnezzar asked him to interpret the dream. Nebuchadnezzar proceeds to tell Daniel about the dream. There was a very tall tree. It grew taller and became strong. The leaves were fair and it bloomed a lot of fruit that fed all the people. It provided shade for the animals and a home for the birds. He saw an angel come down from heaven. The angel ordered the tree to be cut down, its leaves shaken off and the fruit scattered. The animals were chased away. But, the stump was to be left in the grass with its roots, even with a band of iron and brass. It was to be wet with dew, and fed the grass of the earth. Its heart was changed from a man's to a beast's heart for 7 times. This was a decree from the angels to show the living that the Most High ruleth the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomever he setteth up over it. Daniel thought about it for an hour and, it troubled even him. Nebuchadnezzar told him not to let the dream trouble him. But, Daniel was afraid to tell him because the dream would benefit Nebuchadnezzar's enemies. Then he told the interpretation. The tree was Nebuchadnezzar, for he had grown strong and ruled the earth. The angels decreed that he will be driven from the people and left to live with the animals of the field. He will eat grass as oxen and be wet with dew till 7 years pass. Until he knows the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. The commandment to leave the stump and the roots meant Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom will continue until he knows that the heavens do rule. Daniel pleaded with Nebuchadnezzar to break off his sins by righteousness, and his iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, so that it may lengthen his time in his kingdom. Knowing that if this happens, the kingdom will be vulnerable against its enemies. A year later Nebuchadnezzar walked in the palace of Babylon. He took credit for all that was built in his kingdom. His power had consumed him and puffed up his ego. Then a voice from heaven told him that it has been spoken, he shall be driven from men and dwell in the field with the beasts, eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over him until he knows the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. That same hour it was fulfilled. He was driven from men to live in the field. Even his hair and nails grew long. He was basically driven to madness. After 7 years, his sanity returned and he was established back in his kingdom. Then he praised and worshipped God. A Babylonian poem says that Nebuchadnezzar began behaving irrationally in his final years and was suspicious of his sons. Perhaps that is what led to his madness. In the next Daniel episode we will go over Daniel 7, 8, 5, and 6. Be sure to subscribe so you get notified when it gets posted. You won't want to miss the next prophecy meanings.